Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Cal Research's webinar on the Port City Law. Thank you for joining us today. So prior to jumping into sort of the technicalities on the legislature governing the special economic zone, I'd like to sort of provide a bit of context onto the project and like a brief summary on it. So the Port City project was launched in 2014. And it aims to sort of create an extension to Sri Lanka's central business district of Colombo. So by reclaiming 269 hectares of land from the sea and forming a special economic zone within that area. So the project is expected to reach completion by 2041. The Port City project is the largest FDI received by Sri Lanka to date at USD $1.4 billion. It was funded by the Chinese government and it is being developed by the China Harbour Engineering Company with the support of the government of Sri Lanka. So in terms of the land usage and the land allocation, the project company will be able to enjoy the commercial benefits of approximately 43% of the land reclaimed. So this is in order for them to recover the initial investment that was made into sort of reclaiming that land from the sea. So this will account to roughly 116 hectares of land. The government of Sri Lanka will have another 62 hectares of land and have authority over the 91 hectares of common area, which includes the roads, the parks, the waterways, the bridges, and the beach area, all of that. So in terms of sort of like a macroeconomic aspect, we looked at it in 4 different angles. So you can see that the government of Sri Lanka would be generating significant revenue through the Port City project. So they will be having a consolidated fund which will receive funds in 2 forms. So the first one would be they would be getting 1% of the lease revenue earned between June 2023 and June 2028 from the government's marketable land section after deducting any sort of international promotional expenditure incurred by the commission. The second mode that they will be getting funds to this consolidated fund would be through the fees that they receive from the local assessment rates and any other levies imposed by the commission. So besides this revenue, the government will also be able to approximately generate.
It's actually on mute.
Sorry. Hi, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining CAS research webinar on the Port City Law. Prior to jumping into the technicalities on the legislature governing the special economic zone, I'd like to provide some context and take you all through a brief summary of the Port City project. So launched in 2014, the Port City Colombo Development Project aims to create an extension to Sri Lanka's central business district of Colombo. So this is by reclaiming 269 hectares of land from the sea and forming a special economic zone. So the project is expected to reach completion by 2041. The Port City project is the largest FDI that Sri Lanka has received to date at USD 1.4 billion. So it was funded by the Chinese government and it is being developed jointly by the China Harbour Engineering Company with the support of the government of Sri Lanka. So in terms of land usage, the project company will be enjoying the commercial benefits of approximately 43% of the land reclaimed in order to recover its initial investment. So this will roughly be 116 hectares of land. So the government of Sri Lanka will have 62 hectares and also have the authority over 91 hectares of the common area, which includes roads, parkways, parks, waterways, and the beaches and things like that. So in terms of the committed projects currently in the pipeline for Port City, the Colombo International Financial Center, which is a mixed development project spanning over 6.8 hectares of land, which is expected to reach completion by 2025. This will be divided into 2 phases. Phase 1 would have an office tower, 2 residential towers, and a retail podium. So this phase 1 is roughly valued at USD 450 million. And it's jointly developed with Browns Investment PLC, which is the strategic arm of LOLC Group, and the China Harbour Engineering Company. So phase 2 will comprise of 2 office towers and a retail podium. So this investment will be at 550 million, and China Harbour Engineering Company so far is committed to develop the second phase. So in terms of macroeconomic impact, we looked into it in 4 aspects. So the first one being government revenue, foreign direct investment, exchange rate gains, and the employment. So in terms of government revenue, the government would mainly get their revenue from the consolidated fund, which will be between the Port City Commission and the government of Sri Lanka. So this fund will receive revenue in two forms. The first one being 1% of lease revenue earned between June 2023 to June 2028 from the government's marketable land section, leasing that section out. So this 1% commission would be allocated after deducting any sort of international promotional expenditure and other levies imposed by the commission. So in the second way to generate money into this fund would be through the receiving of local assessment rates and any other levies imposed by the commission. So in addition to that, given that casinos and those kind of other activities would be incorporated within the port city, we expect the government of Sri Lanka to get roughly USD 44 million per annum in license fees and levies and income taxes from casinos. So this estimate has come assuming that there will be roughly 2 casinos spanning over 150 square feet and are established with a GGR of USD 124 million each. So in terms of other revenues that the government can, other methods in which government can generate revenue would be in terms of corporate taxes, which the Inland Revenue Department would be able to collect. The thing is, there's no clear indication of what this percentage will be because the income tax that is charged will vary based on the nature of the business operation. So besides all these levies and these income tax revenue, we can also expect the government of Sri Lanka to receive revenue through the leasing of their 62 hectares of marketable land within the port city. So assuming that a perch would go at roughly 20 million LKR, we assume a USD 685 million revenue to the government in non-tax forms through the leasing of land. If you're looking at a foreign direct investment angle, given the 5-year strategic plan of the port city, they have identified in the first phase 20 plots of approximately 60 hectares each, which are available for sale within the pilot project. So this is expected to bring roughly USD 5 billion in worth of investments to Sri Lanka. The commission has also been assigned an annual target of getting roughly 3 billion USD worth of investments into Port City. And besides these kind of very direct inflows of FDI, we also anticipate the sourcing of concrete, the sourcing of sand and other raw materials through local vendors for the development and construction of the Port City project. In terms of an exchange rate gain, we expect the investments in Port City to mostly be foreign currency denominated as the legislation indicates. So most of the investments would be coming from outside of Sri Lanka. So there will be no rupee movement as such, as in there won't be any locals who would be converting rupees into foreign currency and investing in Port City, but rather it would either be completely new foreign investments, or it would be any sort of foreign currency that is being held by Sri Lankan citizens outside Sri Lanka, which would be reallocated to Sri Lanka as investment through the Port City. So the only instances where there would be any sort of LKR movement would be to sort of purchases made in the shopping malls, in the grocery stores, in the purchase of apartments and condos by locals. So in addition to that investment part, we also expect an increase in tourism, which would be driven by the casinos, the shopping mall, MICE tourism, and those kind of things to also bring in foreign currency to Sri Lanka. In terms of an employment perspective, it is expected that approximately 75% of job opportunities within Port City to be reserved for Sri Lankan citizens. And it's expected to aid in sort of the prevention of the brain drain that is happening in Sri Lanka, because it will generate approximately 200,000 jobs within the construction phase, and subsequently 83,000 jobs which would be compensated in USD. If you go to look at the listed entities that are directly benefited, we've mostly sort of identified construction and material companies that would directly benefit during these initial stages of the Port City project. So though local entities won't get to sort of get contracts in the construction, they will definitely get contracts to supply raw materials. So if you take companies like Axis, they do have previous relationships with the China Harbor Company by collaborating with them on other projects. And we believe that this benefit would sort of help them to procure any sort of contracts that will come in future. So they would be able to sort of to supply concrete and asphalt materials. We also looked at Tokyo Cement, who has previously again had dealings with the China Harbor Company. They also command 33% of the cement market in Sri Lanka. And they also have an advantage because cement has a short shelf life and it's not possible to sort of import that and hold it on for a long period of time. So definitely local suppliers will have to cater that dynamic demand. When we look at cables, we saw ACL Cables, Kalani Cables, and Sierra Cables as listed entities who also account for roughly 95% of the cables market. And we expect them also to sort of benefit during the construction phase of the Port City project. So that would be a brief overview on the project. So now I would like to move on to the laws governing the Port City Special Economic Zone area. So we have Ms. Ranila Vijayasundara joining us, who is the legal counsel at CAL, to start off the discussion on the Port City law. And I would like to start that discussion by asking the key features on the Port City Economic Commission Bill.
Thanks, Nilakshay. Yeah, so just to give a brief idea about the key features of the bill, I would like to say that first thing, the act is very clear in its objectives, in what it wants to achieve. The most important one being that it is to set up a special economic zone where there is ease of doing business for the purpose of attracting new investments in the country. And this objective you can see running as like a golden thread throughout the entire act. So this is their main objective, and everything is sort of like, facilitate that. So to do that, they have, and amongst that, the other objectives is obviously to generate employment opportunities, to increase the inflow of foreign exchange into the country, diversify our service economy, and knowledge transfer, which is very important to the country at the moment. So these are the main objectives, and the act is very clear about that. And so then the question comes, okay, how do they want to achieve it? So to achieve it, the act has a couple of mechanisms, and the most important one being is that they are going to set up a special commission to administer and regulate operations within the Port City area. Now, given that ease of doing business is one of the main objectives, one of the commission's main responsibilities is to act as a one-stop shop for investors. So it's called a single window facilitator in the act, but it is essentially to act as a one-stop shop. So that all the investor has to deal with is the commission, and the commission in turn goes and deals with the other regulatory authorities. Like, for example, the BOI also does this within Sri Lanka at the moment. So they will deal with the registrar of companies. If you are, setting up banking operations, then they will deal with the central bank and the monetary board. You need visas, then it's the immigration department they will liaise with, so etc., etc. So really, the success of this Port City will largely depend on the efficacy of the commission. Okay, and a couple of other things that the commission needs to do is that they have to promote the Port City internationally to attract FDI, promote sustainable development, because this is supposed to be a smart city, right? And generate job opportunities. So that is one method through which the Act tries to achieve its objectives. And in doing that, I have to mention the composition of the commission. It's supposed to be 5 to 7 members. And while nationality is not stipulated in the Act, so it can be a local or it can be a foreign citizen who is a commission member, the criteria that the Act lays down is that they need particular expertise in areas like law, information technology, engineering. So that is really the criteria that they're looking at. Nationality is irrelevant as per the Act. So in terms of appointments of the members to the commission, it is vested with the president. He has the right to appoint the commission members. He has the right to remove them. And they have 3-year terms where they can, be re-elected. Then in terms of running the day-to-day operations of the port city and the commission, there will be a director general. So this director general is your equivalent of a CEO in any company. So he or she has to deal with the day-to-day administration. And the director general's appointment too is again vested with the president. Then I think the other key feature of the Act is that it clearly says that the land that was reclaimed for Port City is vested, legal title is vested with the commission. So to that extent, if anybody is entering into a lease or buying land in the Port City, the commission will always act as a lessor or a co-lessor, co-signatory to your lease agreement or your transfer deed. So I think that's important because there was this question, when it was being reclaimed about, is it, a part of Sri Lanka? Is it not? So I think the Act is quite clear in the fact that title vests with the commission. The other important aspect of the Act, I think, in terms of doing business, is that it introduces a new alternative dispute resolution mechanism to settle disputes. Because that has been a problem in Sri Lanka where, disputes don't get, it takes a very long time. So this, I think, is another way that they have tried to, facilitate ease of doing business. So there will be an international dispute resolution center set up within Port City. And they are not only going to give arbitration services, there's mediation, there's conciliation, there's adjudication. So there are various different types of dispute resolution mechanisms that will be available to investors. And they're hoping that the rules that the center set up will be, it will be in line with international standards. So if you're looking at the SIAC, that's very efficient. So maybe they will replicate something like that. But the idea is for speedy settlement of disputes. Now, in terms of enforcement, also, I think the Act has tried to solve the issue that we currently face right now, which is that yes, you can get your arbitration award, but when it comes to enforcement, you have to go to the local court, and that sometimes takes a little bit of time. So what the Act has done is it has given a fast-track enforcement mechanism. Yes, enforcement will be in the local courts through the current Arbitration Act of 1995, but the courts have to give priority to disputes arising in the Port City to these cases, and the case basically needs to be taken up on a day-to-day basis, so that you're looking at, within the span of maybe 2 weeks, your arbitration award will be enforced. So I think those are the key features of the Act that we can look forward to.
So in terms of some key points that was noted in the Supreme Court determination, what could you comment about that?
Sure. So the Supreme Court determination, as you know, it had a lot of people challenging it. So lots of issues were raised, which was great because you need to discuss the issues, right? The court needs to consider them. So the court has actually put out a 69-page determination. I don't think they may have addressed every issue, but the majority of the issues, they seem to have applied their mind to it and given an opinion. So some of the key things that come out of the determination, first thing is the fact that this reclaimed land is very much a part of the territory of Sri Lanka, right? Because there was a question of, does it fall within the administrative district of Colombo or not? You know, who will Parliament be able to legislate over it, or is somebody entirely outside of Sri Lanka who can do it? And the court has categorically said, no, this falls within the administrative district of Colombo. It is a part of Sri Lanka, and the Parliament can certainly legislate over it, which is why this act is also, you know, it's enforceable. The second thing that the determination said was that all Sri Lankan laws, except the ones that are specifically exempted from the bill, from the act, will apply at Port City. And for example, and actually this is an example that the Supreme Court gave in its determination. They said, if you're looking at anti-money laundering laws of the country, that's not exempted from the act, so therefore it applies. So essentially the regulatory mechanisms that are there in the rest of the country will also apply to Port City. Of course, there may be, you can through regulation make certain adjustments, but again, it is still, you use a mechanism that you use for the rest of the country, right? So unless it's exempted, then there are about 5 to 6 acts which are exempted. All the other laws apply to Port City as well. So I think that was one key feature. Then the other one was that, the Supreme Court made an amendment. They suggested an amendment where it was thought to be there was a gray area in terms of whether the commission needed the approval of the other regulatory authorities when they are issuing their license, or was it simply like a rubber stamping mechanism that the bill had. So the Supreme Court said, look, let's clarify this. The regulatory authorities must have the discretion to accept the application, or to say, no, we don't want to give a license to this applicant. So in terms of that, they made an adjustment to the wording of the act. And given that the government has committed to incorporating all the amendments that the Supreme Court suggested, we can hope that the act actually has that in place. So it's very clear. The commission has to get the recommendation, the approval of the regulatory authorities, and that regulatory authority has a discretion to say yes or no. That. And I think the other major important thing that came out of the determination was that Parliament needs to be involved in coming up with guidelines for issuing the tax exemption. Well, because, and I think it's important and a good thing for 2 reasons. One thing is that it gives transparency. And the second thing is that even from an investor's perspective, they know in advance if they bring in, X level of investment, they are probably likely to get ABC exemption. So it gives even the investor some sort of a, idea about what they can expect. So that power to make regulations, to give guidelines on tax exemptions, like, what's the basis for giving, certain tax exemptions, what would be the levels of investment that a person has to bring in, that Parliament needs to get involved in. So I think those are the key points that which we can take from the determination.
So we will be commencing the Q&A section of this info session. Please direct your questions towards Capital Alliance on the chat. I will start it off with asking the question of who can invest in Port City and in which currency?
Okay. So who can invest in Port City? Simple answer, anybody, any person, any company who gets a license from the commission to set up a business. So you would say it doesn't specify residents, non-residents, there's no distinction, any person. And the currencies that you can use for your investment are those that are used in Sri Lanka at the moment as designated foreign currency, in the sense for where banks transact and do you do those. So that would be USD, GBP, your Euro, Australian, Canadian, Singapore, Hong Kong dollar, obviously the Chinese renminbi, the yen, the Hong Kong dollar. So those 14 also designated foreign currencies. We can.
So if you're taking a context of local companies, so if they were to invest, is there sort of a mechanism for them to get into investing into Port City? How are they going to do that? Is there any way to do so?
Yes. So this is the thing. Sri Lankan companies definitely can invest in Port City. Only thing is that the only requirement is that they have to source their investment from outside of Sri Lanka. So if you have foreign currency reserves outside Sri Lanka, that is what you need to use. So the restriction is basically twofold. One is, say, for example, one is that you can't use the foreign currency deposits that you have in Sri Lanka, right? So for example, if you're an exporter, you'll have your dollar earnings in a BFCA with a local bank. Now you can't use that funding to make your investment into Port City. The other thing is that you can't approach your local bank and say, hey, give me a foreign currency dollar loan, okay, to make this investment. So those two sources of funding you can't use. So you can't use your retained earnings. What you have to do is you have to go outside of Sri Lanka and go to the foreign capital markets and the foreign banks and procure your investment from outside. And there are ways to do it. I mean, you can certainly structure your investments. For example, if you have, you're a local company, you have your foreign subsidiary, say, for example, in Singapore, then that subsidiary can access the foreign capital markets or their lenders and procure that investment and make the investment into Port City. So there are lots of ways of structuring it. It's just that the investment can't be raised in Sri Lanka.
So in that sense, like what type of investments will be allowed within Port City?
So in terms of investments, obviously real estate. The second thing is the offshore banking, and also offshore businesses. So now when it comes to offshore business, the act does sort of mention some types of businesses, but it's not limited to that. So some of the things which the act sort of implies that they are looking at is gaming, hub operations, companies setting up their headquarter operations in Port City, then shipping and logistics, then IT related. So those sort of things you can gather from the wording in the act, but it's not limited. It really is about the investor showing what they can bring to the country in terms of both foreign exchange plus in terms of developing the Sri Lankan economy. So especially if you take, so there's a classification called businesses of strategic importance. That is, it's defined in the act and it's broadly defined. And basically it sort of covers projects which will bring large economic and social benefits to the country or change the landscape of the Port City. So, and they sort of give a criteria to measure what would constitute a business of strategic importance. That would be, again, the same thing, the inflow of foreign exchange, how many jobs can you create, what's the technology transfer, destination promotion. So those sort of things, they will look at. And if you are classified as a business of strategic importance, you get entitled to tax exemption.
So I think you mentioned the casinos and the gaming licenses and that kind of thing. So how does it work within Port City? Is the government allowed to sort of issue new licenses, or how will that work, the casinos and gaming?
Well, it's like this. the Act specifically talks about gaming and the fact that the Commission has the power to regulate gaming activities within Port City. So that just is a clear indication that there will be licenses that will be granted. And they also contemplate giving tax concessions on gaming activities. So it's sort of an indirect way of saying that, yes, there will be gaming activities and licenses.
So I think there was a lot of question and like controversy about the fact that the whole local banks not being able to set up the operations. Is it possible for local banks to go and sort of set up an operation within the Port City limits, or is it completely banned?
No, local banks certainly can set up offshore banking operations, which is exactly the same thing that even a foreign bank can do in Port City. If anyone coming in, any bank coming into Port City would be giving offshore banking services. So there is no distinction. Both of them are allowed actually. And that license is actually granted by the Minister of Finance with the approval of the Monetary Board. And if you're looking at in terms of regulations, of course, I think there will be regulations, governing financial services and offshore banking. And what the Act says is that it's the president or the subject minister for Port City who will make those regulations, of course, consulting the finance minister and the monetary board. And the Act contemplates those regulations to cover things like how do you grant the license, how do you revoke the license, what are the capital adequacy requirements, liquidity, risk management. So there may be separate regulations covering all of that, which is specific to Port City. But certainly they can set up offshore banking operations.
I think another thing that was in a lot of people talking about was the whole setting up of an exchange within the Port City. So will there sort of be a stock market, a bond market, a commodities exchange or something of that sort within Port City? If they do start something like that, how would that work?
Yeah, so the Act provides for it. It provides for any stock, precious metal or a commodities market to be created within the Port City. And just like any other business that is trying to set up in Port City, they would need to get a license from the Commission before they can begin operations. In terms of regulation, the Act says that it will actually be regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka and that Act. And the current SEC regulations will apply until the Commission comes up with new regulations. Not the Commission, but basically the President and the subject minister. So yes, if they are anticipating setting that up, but we'll have to wait to see how it would kind of play out. And of course, there is in the Act it says that SEC may actually be asked to set up an office within Port City to facilitate, the approvals coming quicker and to regulate it.
So you mentioned about the CSE. So does that mean that companies that incorporate within the Port City can list on the Colombo Stock Exchange or anything like that?
That we can't say for right now, because with the thing with listing on the Colombo Stock Exchange is that it's in LKR, right? It's not foreign denominated currency. But of course, Colombo Stock Exchange also, from what we hear, is they're looking at setting up multi-currency. So perhaps, so it's a possibility, but not clear at the moment.
So obviously, one key thing in ease of doing business would be the tax structure. So in terms of like tax concessions that are available for projects within Port City, any sort of visibility on that?
So like I said, if it's a business of strategic importance, they will get, they can apply for tax exemptions. What those exemptions are, there's like a list of acts which they could get exemptions from. It will really depend on the level of investment and what they're going to do. So we're looking at potential tax exemptions from income tax, from VAT, then the port and airport development levy, then if you're a bank, debit tax, entertainment tax, customs tax. So there are, quite a few tax exemptions that a business of strategic importance can get.
As we can see, there's a host of projects that are expected to be starting up in Port City. So obviously something that would deter investors would be a sort of the approval process. Is there any sort of indication, or can you take us through that approval process for projects within the Port City?
Sure. So like I said, the main point of the commission is to act as a one-stop shop. So very basically, the process involves the investor making an application to the commission. And that application, I think, looking at the act, it sort of looks a lot like how you make a Section 17 application to the BOI, which is you have to tell what is the level of FDI you're bringing in, from where are you sourcing it, and how will it be used? What are your working capital requirements? Then what sort of jobs, how many jobs would you, would you generate? Those sort of things. So your application would have to specify all of that, and you submit your application to the commission, and the commission reviews it. And if they, if they're happy with it, they of course have the power to call for more information if they need. So they review your application, and if it seems acceptable, they act as the facilitator between all the regulatory authorities. They will get in touch with the relevant regulator to get their approval. For example, obviously, you would need to a certificate of incorporation or registration from the company registrar to set up your business. So they will talk to the registrar of companies, and if the registrar of companies is in agreement and he approves, then they will facilitate that. If you're setting up a banking operation, they will liaise with the monetary board and central bank. So that's really, their role. They will facilitate, and they're supposed to facilitate and act between all those regulatory authorities. And then if they would grant the license. And with the granting of the license, the investor has to enter into an investment agreement with the commission. So it's just like a BOI agreement. Or, if you're a Section 17 company, you enter into a BOI agreement with the BOI. So it's similar to that. You would enter into one with the commission, which will probably have all the conditions attached to your investment. If you're a business, of course, that gets classified as a business of strategic importance. There is one more layer of approvals which the commission has to get, and that is cabinet approval. But that is all with the commission. It's their job to go present it to the president or the subject minister and recommend what sort of tax exemptions that this project should get, and then approach cabinet and get cabinet approval for those tax exemptions.
So one of the questions that were also posted were asking, if you're operating outside the Port City before construction is complete, where can you operate from and how it would work?
Okay, so yes, the Act does sort of provide for that, in the sense of the Act says that there will be a designated location outside of Port City from where you can operate. Now, what that location is still not specified, but I'm sure they will do that soon. And once you can make an application to the commission with basically for your license, and in that the commission can allow you to start your business operations from that location outside of the Port City, and there would not be a problem to the incentives or the tax, the exemptions that you would be given under the Act. So for 5 years from the date of the Act commencing, you have time to work from outside the port city. So for example, if the Act is going to come into force 2021, you have until 2026 basically to move your operations into port city.
So there have been a lot of rumors and things like that circulating about the accessibility to port city for Sri Lankan citizens. So is this true? Do you need permission from some authority to enter port city? Are there restrictions for Sri Lankan citizens to enter the limits of port city? What are the guidelines and regulations on that?
So that's because the original text of the bill, yes, did have something to the effect that you may need the permission of the commission to enter port city. But the Supreme Court said that's not acceptable because that obviously a citizen of Sri Lanka should be able to go to any place in this country without any restrictions. So that was removed. So Sri Lankans, anyone can access port city. They can go and visit it. They can go, enjoy the restaurants, the entertainment facilities, shopping, everything. They can do it without restriction. And if you are a local, you can pay in LKR for those facilities and services. One thing that is still there is that say you are you buy retail goods at port city, there is a possibility for you to be charged a duty or a levy if you're taking those goods outside of the port city. So that is there, that is preserved, but accessing and using the facilities, there is no restriction.
So one huge attraction to obviously citizens of Sri Lanka was the job opportunities that were being sort of generated through the Port City project. So now they did mention that they would be compensated in dollar-denominated currency. So something that you mentioned was that they won't be able to sort of bring that whatever the purchases within Port City outside. So if in the case Sri Lankans are working within Port City and they're remunerated in USD, what would be the regulations for them to be able to bring that out?
So it's like this. Those are two different things. One is if you're buying goods, right? And for that, if you're taking it out, then if you're a Sri Lankan and if you're a resident, then you may be charged a levy. But in terms of an employee, and if you're earning in foreign currency within the port city, one thing is that the Act clearly says that employees within the port city must be paid in foreign currency. There is no option of paying a local in LKR, right? So they have to. But if you're looking at how can they, you're an employee at Port City, you have your dollar earnings. Can you take it out of the country or something like that? The answer is no. Because the law says that, yes, you can earn in dollars, but that employment income, you need to, in that case, maintain it in your personal foreign currency account in your local bank. So that if you're trying to take your dollars out and things, the ordinary law of the country applies. So if there are exchange control restrictions on Sri Lankans, using foreign currency, so and making investments out of Sri Lanka. So for that purpose, that's why they said you need to deposit that then in your personal foreign currency account, and then the normal exchange control laws apply.
So me as a local investor, besides sort of going shopping or making money in terms of job opportunity, if I was to go and buy a land or an apartment in Port City, how would that work?
Are you talking as a local, as a Sri Lankan?
As a local Sri Lankan citizen.
Okay. So if you want to buy land, say an apartment in Port City, it's possible. There's no restriction. You can pay in LKR. for your apartment. Only there is one thing that, say, for example, you buy an apartment and then if you're going to sublease your apartment to somebody else within the next 5 years of getting that apartment, and you're paid in foreign currency for it. Now you paid in LKR, but you're getting foreign currency payment. The act says that you need to deposit that foreign currency earning into an RFC, a resident foreign currency account with a commercial bank in Sri Lanka, so that it's then again you get subjected to exchange control.
So if I was a foreign national who was buying for an apartment, how would that work? It's the same process.
So it's like this. There's the Restriction on Alienation Act, where foreigners can't outright buy land. So that restriction still applies. The act preserves that. So if you're a foreigner, then you would have to lease it because you can't buy land, you can't own it. Freehold, I mean, but you can certainly lease it because all of the restrictions that are currently applicable to foreigners continue even here.
So a question that we actually got was asking if investors are only given a leasehold right to the land and not a freehold right.
It depends, like I said, on your status. Are you, do you come within the parameters of the Land Restriction on Alienation Act or not?
So something that my person is highlighting the questions was that the Sri Lankan government is pretty inconsistent with its policies. So if going forward, any amendments were to be made to the Port City law, how would that come into play?
It will have to follow the same way that any law in Sri Lanka right now is amended through an Amendment Act of Parliament. So it has to go through the parliamentary process. So which would then involve an amendment bill that is, then of course, then that gets, you can take it up and you can challenge it in the Supreme Court, and then Parliament will vote on it. So same process as is followed now for anything else.
Again, another question that was posted was, can local companies simply shift their operations inside Port City to obtain any tax-related benefits available exclusively within the boundaries of the Port City?
Sorry, Nila, that wasn't too clear.
The question was asking if local companies can switch their operations from Sri Lanka to Port City to kind of benefit from any sort of tax benefit that would be given for business operations within the Port City.
Well, switch in the sense that they would set it up, right?
Yeah, to go and set it
up. Operation. So yes.
So will Sri Lankan law and court system apply in the Port City, or will a separate legal system prevail?
No. So the Sri Lankan legal system would apply in the sense of if, like I said, there are certain acts which are exempt from operation within the Port City, but everything else sort of applies. So my understanding is that, for example, if you commit a crime in Port City, the ordinary law of the land would apply because it's not exempted. To that extent, it's the same thing. Only thing is, when it comes to dispute resolution, there is a fast track process which you can use if you're, to settle your disputes in the Port City. But those are commercial and civil law related matters.
So another question that was posted was if there will be a separate customs and immigration authority to be set up within the Port City, or will the relevant local bodies have jurisdiction over that?
Like I said, so every regulatory authority that is there still continues to have authority. It's just that the commission acts as a facilitator between the investor and those regulatory authorities. They are just trying to cut through the red tape. And it's the commission's job to go and get those approvals, speak to the immigration department if you need visas and things like that. So your application will have all your visa requirements, And the commission goes and takes that and goes to the Department of Immigration and gets their approval for those things. So it's not a case of those you having new regulatory authorities in the port city. You still work with the ones that you have. For example, if there's going to be a stock exchange, the Securities and Exchange Commission will maybe asked to come and set up an office within port city. So
I would also like to remind everyone, you can post your questions in the chat to Capital Alliance and we will take them up. Another question that was posted to us asked, will entities operating in the port city be exempt from Sri Lankan foreign exchange controls?
Sorry, Nilaksha, could you repeat that again?
The question was, will entities operating in the port city be exempt from Sri Lankan foreign exchange controls?
Okay, so that's where it's a little, it's not that clear, because if you look at there's a schedule 2, which talks about exemptions from various acts like the Inland Revenue Act, the VAT Act, and exchange control is also there. But the provision in the act which relates to that schedule speaks specifically about tax-related exemptions. So now Exchange Control Act does not relate to any tax, that there's no tax involved. So why it's there, it's not very clear. We'll have to wait and see about how they might carve out that, if at all.
So another question that was posted was on the employment. So they asked if there was an amendment to the bill requiring the companies to hire 75% local employees, or was just the passing statement that was made?
Okay, so that was a statement they made by the Prime Minister. Whether it went into the final text, we will, at committee stage of the Parliament, we will have to wait and see for the final text to come out, because it was a statement. We can't be sure until the final one comes.
In terms of visas to entering port city for foreign nationals, will that be governed by the prevailing Sri Lankan law, or will there be another law dictating that?
From the way the act is worded, it seems it's the current law.
I think most of the questions that were asked, we have covered. Some of them were just a repeat of some of the things that we covered. So there are no further questions. I would like to thank everyone on behalf of myself, Cal Research, and Ranila for joining us today for the Port City Law info session. If you have any questions, feel free to email us and we will get back to you with any clarification that you require. The research team will also be sending out a note to our clients covering what we discussed today on the Port City Bill and the amendments and general overview that we spoke about within this webinar. So I would like to thank you all once again for joining us, and we hope to see you all soon. Stay safe.